Good evening, everyone. We are continuing our study in the book of Second Samuel, chapter 10. Again, as I would like to point out to you, uh, this word now would be something that will happen after an incident. Now, this word and uh, implies that it is a completely not related incident. That's the way that we are now to understand, because this is now to tell us that after chapter 9, something totally different is happening. Now, something happened, and for a while, the king of the Ammonites died, and his son, um, Hanum, became king in his place. Now, this idea of the king of Ammonites being important to us is that if you recall in chapter 8, we had the Ammonites as a servant, right? The Ammonites were a servant to David. Now, what this means is that this becomes that Ammon becomes a vassal. They would give tribute to Israel. For us to know and appreciate this vassal state, what it really means is David came, David conquered, but David didn't take over the land, and they gave gifts to Israel. Very similar to the time when Babylon came and they conquered Judea and Jerusalem, and they made the king a vassal king that they were to be subservient to Babylon. Now, all through those subservient years, they were just plotting for the right time to get back at King Babylon. And similarly here with the Ammonites, the king of Ammonites, were very friendly, but when he died, his son Hanum became king in his place, and that didn't happen, which tells us that as long as you have a change of guard, or even with the same king, ideas may change with regards to the relationship with Israel. Verse 2. In this case, we find that David was thinking to himself that I will show kindness to Hanum. This is chesed. Kindness here is chesed. As we saw yesterday, kindness can be seen. And so it is seen in the actions that is being describing loyalty, kindness. So it's not just mere words, there would be real gestures. And it is extended to Hanum, the son of Nahash, just as his father showed kindness to me. Now, there are a great deal of speculation. What do you mean that his father, and his father is Nahash, showed kindness to David? Since when? And so this one tells us that according to Jewish traditions, I would just say Jewish traditions, there were there are traditions that says that the 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 that when in first First Samuel chapter 22 verse 4, when the father and mother and the brothers of David went to see him, uh David sent them to the king of Moab, and apparently according to tradition, the king of Moab killed all of them except one. And that's why in chapter 8 we saw that possibly that was why David lined them up 2 to 1 and killed two portions to one portion of the Moabites. Today, when we see this, that the king of Ammon who is Nachash, showed kindness. Traditions say that one of those didn't die and ran to Ammon and sought refuge. And King Nachash took care of him. Now, again, I mentioned this is very much Jewish traditions. Now, in the scripture, we do not have any visible evidence as to exactly what happened and why did Nachash show kindness to David. And so, like I said, all we have is the Jewish tradition. So David sent some of his servants to console him about his father. But when David's servants came to the land of the Ammonites, and it says the commanders of the Ammonites said to the Lord, Hanum, do you think David is simply honoring your father since he has sent you servants to console you? Has David not sent his servants to you in order to explore, to spy it out, and to overthrow it? This is the case where you get bad advice from bad advisors. So let's take a look at the second part of verse 2. The second part of verse 2 says that David sent. Now understand this word sent. Sent is shalak. And it really means to send people to represent David, to speak on behalf of David. That is the point here. So whenever you see the word sent, it is to send ambassadors to represent the nation. So in this case, represent David. And they are some of his servants. Some of his servants to console him. This is to, well, I guess consoling is a good word because the father has passed on. But when David's servants came into the land of the Ammonites, the commanders are the chiefs, right? The chiefs of the Ammonites said to the Lord, Hanum, do you think that David is simply coming here to honor, give importance to your father since he has sent you servants to console you? Has David not sent his servants in order to explore the city, to spy it out, and to overthrow it? So all this is bad advice. And the advice is to paint Israel into a bad light. And often when there are people who are strong enough to overthrow Israel, they would plot against Israel. And so this is some of the beginnings that we can see words being said to mar the image of Israel, to paint a picture of Israel that they are so bad that all they want to do is to conquer. Now we have read in chapter 8, David came, David conquered, and David went back. And they left the nations for themselves to take care of themselves as long as they gave tribute. So we've cleared verse 3. And in verse 4, you find that Hanun took David's servants. Then it is important then in verse 4 to be very clear. Shaved off half their beards, cut off their robes in the middle as far as their buttocks, and send them away. Now, this whole idea of shaving half, you would find that this is to shave off, to cut off half, right? Half of their beards. Now, the word beards is a very interesting word. Not sure whether you are aware. The word beard is zakan. We use a Q here, zakan. And it means beard. Beard from the chin, right? Or you say hair from the chin. Now, in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 27, God says to them, do not disfigure or spoil the edges of your beard, which means that the Israelites actually generally do not shave or do not even trim their beard. And when you have this incident that Hanun took the servants and shaved off half their beards, they would have defiled their beards. They would have disfigured their beards. So, what could that be? That if we have this as a person, a mustache, and then we have their beards, right? Long flowing beards. So, let's do it this way, flowing beards. And what they did was they shaved half away. And that is a very strange example, but they shaved half off, right? They shaved half off. So if we were to redraw this, you find that it would be a very odd picture, right? All right. So let's do it this way. So they shaved off half their beard, maybe a little bit more. Half the beard, right? And this is really to humiliate, right? It's to humiliate. And you find that the other thing that they did was to cut off their robes in the middle as far as their buttocks. Um, this word here is their posterior. And so what they may have is they may have their garments, and they cut it apart. So from the back side, anyways, right? The back side, anyways, and it's cut all the way down, right? And all this is cut off. And so this would expose their buttocks, their backside. Now, I guess we need to be able to identify with this kind of a practice. This is to humiliate because they are Jews. They are not supposed to do anything to their beard. And so Hanun just cut half off, which means that they can't go back to face their family. They cut off their robes in the middle and expose their private backside and then send them off. And that really is a sign of humiliation. Now, think with me. These are the men that David Shalak, David sent the servants to represent David. And so when you did that to his servants, symbolically, you are doing that to David. And so when he went back, when the messengers, first of all, there is no word messengers here, so we just strike this off. When these servants, right, these servants went back, he sent servants to meet them. Now, this word servants also doesn't exist. He sent someone to meet them. The reason is that these people didn't go back to see David. They were hiding because the men were extremely humiliated. The word humiliated here is to be dishonored. What else is that? Put to shame. Right? To be reproached, to be insulted. And so I hope that you see the emotions of these servants. And the king said, stay in Jericho until your beards grow. Then you come back. And so this is for us to know that David is concerned about their dignity. And David gave them time, right, to regrow their beards. Now, when the sons of Ammon saw that they had become repulsive to David, now this word repulsive, I hope you understand. This word is stink. The word repulsive is stink. Smell bad. And when something smells bad, you do something about it. And in this case, when things smell bad, you want to destroy it, to throw it away. And this is the kind of picture that we are being painted. The sons of Ammon sent and hired the Arameans of Beth Rehob and the Arameans of Zophah, 20,000 foot soldiers, and a king of Maacah with 1,000 men, and the men of Tov with 12,000 men. What you find is that the Ammonites had money to hire mercenaries. Now, what do you mean by mercenaries? It means that they use money to pay for soldiers. That's what we're told, right? And so when David heard, he sent Joab and all the army, the warriors. So we can see in verse 7, says when David hears this, he sends Joab and all the army. This would be all in service. Savaot, right? And he says the warriors, the Gibor. And this would really mean the mighty men, strong, brave. And that is what Joab is setting up to fight this hired hand or hired mercenaries. In verse 8, at the same time the sons of Ammon came out. This word, and then after they secured the Arameans, the sons of Ammon came out, line of a battle at the entrance of the city, while the Arameans of Zophah and Rehob and the men of Tov and Maacah, they stationed by themselves in the field, which means now we have two flanks. We have the Arameans, and then we have the Ammonites. And both will come at them. That's the picture here. And then when Joab saw that the battle was set against him at the front and at the rear, the selected from all the choice men in Israel lined up against the Arameans. What do you mean set up at the front and the rear? Which means that it is in front and at the back of him. So we have Joab situated something like this. The choice men in verse 9 would be the men that he had selected. Now, the rest of the people he put under the command of Avishai, and he lined them up against the sons of Ammon. And so now we have Avishai, against Ammon, Joab against the Arameans. And so now it is split into two. In verse 11, this is what the two brothers had colluded. If the Arameans are too strong, you shall help me. If the sons of Ammon are too strong for you, I will come to help you. This idea of help, save, right? Save. And then I will walk to save you. So what is important is the two brothers had an understanding that they would come to each other's rescue. Now, in a battle, they would say these things: be strong, let's show ourselves courageous for the sake of our people and the cities of our God. All the cities that God asked them to conquer, they had. And may the Lord do what is good in his sight. Again, this whole idea, may the Lord do what is good in his eyes. See, one of the things about good, right? You have good, you have evil, you have grace. All of this is in the eyes. In the eyes of the beholder. If the one looking at it and he likes it, then it is tov. When he doesn't like it, it's ra. That's very important as a concept in Hebrew. So Joab and the people who were with him advanced to the battle against the Aramean, and they fled from him. And so the people, this word says advance. The word here is approach. This one means come near. Approach. In this particular battle, they ran away. Right? They ran away. So the idea here is they fled. Right? And that would be to escape. And so with this concept, you find that there are two battalions as with Joab and Avishai. And they have given themselves an understanding that they will help each other when the time comes. Just now in verse 13, the Arameans had tried to flee and run away. When the sons of Ammon saw that the Arameans had fled, this is to run away. Right? Run away. And they also fled from Avishai and entered the city. Then Joab returned from against the sons of Ammon and came to Jerusalem. When the Arameans saw that they had been defeated by Israel, they assembled together. And Hadad-Ezer sent word and brought out the Arameans who were beyond the Euphrates River. And they had came to Helam. Helam and Skovak, the commander of the army of Hadad-Ezer, led them. So Hadad-Ezer is the one that David had conquered up north from the land of Israel. And with this, we find that there is a possible end to the war around them. So in verse 17, we have the word and then. We can see it from here. And then it was reported to David. When it was reported to David, and as David understood what happened to Ammon and the Aramean, he, David, as commander-in-chief of Israel, gathered all Israel together. So it's no longer just a small group where Joab and Avishai went to the battle. David took the entire army, crossed the Jordan, came to Chelam, and the Arameans lined up against David and fought him. Now, earlier on, Joab was advancing and they ran off. But in this case, when they lined up against David and tried to fight David, but the Arameans fled from Israel. And then, as they fought, the result of fighting caused the Arameans to escape. And when you talk about escape from Israel, it means that Israel is way too strong for the Arameans. And David killed 700 charioteers of the Arameans, 40,000 horsemen, struck Skovak, the commander of their army, and he died there. And so, what the narrative is trying to tell us is that this is a significant battle. And it was massive. It was massive. And David went in and wiped them out. In verse 19, it says, when all the kings, servants of Hadad-Ezer, saw that they had been defeated by Israel, they made peace with Israel and served them. So the Arameans were afraid to help the sons of Ammon anymore. The Arameans is not going to be bought by the Ammonites. Now it says here, when the kings, it means all the kings of the land there, and they have been defeated. Now this word defeated would be, how would you say, would be stricken. That Israel struck them, right? Israel struck them. And so they made shalom with Israel. And with the shalom of Israel, they worked for them, served them. So the Arameans were afraid. The word afraid is terrified. To help the sons of Ammon anymore. Now, this word sons is B'nai, and we always see that in the Bible, B'nai Israel, but it gets translated as the children of Israel. But in this case, it's the same construct as there, and it's translated as the sons of Ammon. What this tells us is that David himself had conquered Ammon and Aramean. And with that, every mouth is silenced because they are now paying tribute to Israel. Now, this whole period is called the golden years of Israel. In the golden years where Israel's borders were enlarged by David, the vassal states were all around. And when they started giving trouble, like this chapter, David went and struck them down. And so it is to say that David is extremely powerful, now well respected, and nobody would dare to come near him. And so this is a picture of chapter 10 itself, where we had the episode, right? The episode with the son of Nahash by the name of Hanun, and well, all the disappointments came when Hanun humiliated the people that were sent by David, and thereby struck a chord where David himself came out to fight. And when you see the king coming out to fight, the king is avenging on the humiliation to teach the nations that did that a lesson. And so with this, we find that David, at the end of chapter 10, has done such an incredible job that he put fear in every one of the nations around them, that they are not to help each other. They're not to gang up against Israel. And Israel has the ability to defend herself. And David himself will take the battle to them. And with this, we've come to the end of our session today.